Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Almost Dropouts podcast. I'm your host, Daivik, and today I have Shreyas, and the senior Amazon PM. Shreyas, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Daivik. First of all, thank you for having me. I know this is really difficult time for every single person, and whatever you are doing through this podcast, through various other channels on LinkedIn, I'm pretty sure it's helping all the new grads who are trying to enter into the market, and also some of the folks who recently lost their job because of the COVID 19. So
Mhm.
with that, really appreciate all your work. A little bit about myself. I'm Shreyas, senior product manager at Amazon. Been in product management and program management for the last 4 plus years. Before that, I started my career as a software engineer. So took a traditional route, work as a software engineer, entered
Mhm.
into the program management, and eventually uh, enter into the product management. My primary experience in program and product management is around e-commerce. So worked on a e-commerce search, e-commerce platform with a couple of companies, one in Bay Area, company called Bloomreach, and then also in Vancouver, Canada, with Elastic Path, and then joined Amazon 9 months ago. I am
Mhm.
part of Amazon's recruiting tech engine.
Mhm.
So mainly focuses on Amazon.jobs as a PM.
Mhm. Yeah. So, like you guys heard, Shreyas has a lot of experience in the past, and I think to start off this podcast, let's talk about your journey from software engineering to product management, because I know that's one that's common for a lot of people, me included. So when I first started, I started off in software engineering, doing software engineering internships, and then I slowly started to transition into product management. But I'd love to hear your story about uh, how you transitioned and some of the steps you took to transition, because I know a lot of people reach out to me and they're like, hey, I'm doing software engineering internships, but if I want to do product management in the future or program management in the future, how do I take that experience and start shifting it towards helping me achieve those? And so I'd love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, for sure, Devik. And to be honest, when I started my career as a software engineer, I didn't even know what product management is all about. And I
Yeah.
didn't even know where I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a long term plan, to be honest. And to be precise, I didn't even know when it encountered to me where I started feeling I want to become a product manager. But just to
Mm-hmm.
give you an idea about my journey, after I finished my undergrad in India, I worked in India for 1 year and I wanted to convert my theoretical experience in a software development into more of a practical experience. Uh, like I learned a lot back in India at a theoretical level, but didn't have much background that time
Mm-hmm.
or hands-on experience that time. So I decided to come to US to do my masters. I finished my masters from University of Houston at Clear Lake in computer science and started working as a software engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So my journey started at a pretty small scale company called Mezio Software in Houston, and during that time. I got an opportunity to work on a very small Outlook plugin, and I was a software designer, software engineer, doing the discovery, doing the competitive analysis, like
Mm-hmm.
basically a single guy doing everything, because my
Right.
company size was like around 40 people, like,
Oh
and I'm
wow.
talking
Okay.
about the total company size, which is including sales, marketing, like engineering,
Right.
senior leadership and all that. So I was the only guy who was doing everything, like including
Yeah.
the dev work, research work, analysis, talking to salespeople, doing the go-to market strategy, thinking about my customers. And at that point, I realized this is interesting. To be
Right.
honest, I didn't know this was the product management or this is something which I wanted to do in the future. But I thought it is exciting because now I am I have an opportunity to set a long term strategy for my product, like talk about where I want to go, what I want to
Hmm.
do, think about more strategically rather than just doing one of a task on a day to day basis. And that was an excitement feeling for me at a personal
Hmm.
level. From there, then I decided I want to officially entered into a management world, and I thought it's better to have some management background. And then I decided to pursue my business school from Arizona State University. So I did my MBA from Arizona State University, and then because I wanted to enter into a management side and I wanted to become a first managing the projects, I finished my PMP certification, which is a pretty well-known project management certification in industry, and it has a global recognition. So I finished that. By the way, I have a book as well on that, which I wrote it on Amazon.com. So if you guys are interested, please let me know. Happy to share that with
Oh, cool.
everyone. And then from there, I got a chance to join Bloomreach, more into a program management role. Started doing the program management there, more on
Hmm.
to a customer facing side, doing the e-commerce search implementation on some of the pretty well-known retail brands, including JCPenney, Disney, Neiman Marcus. So started getting that experience, and that was the time when I realized I want to become a product manager. First,
Right.
I was in Silicon Valley, where all the product management dream comes into reality.
Yeah.
And second, I was also closer to a customer. I started seeing customers' pain point. I started realizing this is something I want to solve. And
Hmm.
just that thought of solving a customer problem uh, made me realize I think it's better to be in a PM role if I really want to take an opportunity and solve my customer's problem. And that's when I started my journey towards the product management. I formally took a product school course
Okay.
on a product management, started reaching out to some of the experienced PMs in the industry just to understand what product management is all about. Started reading a few blogs as
Hmm.
well. Some of the books which I read before I entered into product management, like one is the pretty much famous book inspired by Marty Kagan. Most of the PMs know about this book, and I thought this was a like a bible for a PM. At least that
Okay.
kind of set a
Yeah.
foundation for me
Hmm.
to understand what product management is all about. And I think that was the point when I entered into the PM side, like did a transition through Blue Breach, and then also pick up more PM work at Elastic Path.
Hmm. Okay. And I guess to follow up on that, so I know one of the toughest things is that how do you start taking that software engineering like experience from your internships or your jobs and start shifting that towards product management so you can try to get those positions in the future. So I was just wondering from your experience, how do you think, even in a software engineering role or your internship, how can you start doing more product management type of stuff so you can get more familiarity on this field and also get experience to put on your resume?
I think as a product manager, you always have to think about long term, right? There is a strategic side, or there is a strategic brain for a PM versus there is a tactical brain, which also correlates with the concept of a right brain versus left brain approach. And
Hmm.
as a software engineer, sometimes you just focus on that individual task without realizing what you want to do next. And I think the PM's job is to talk about that, right? So when you will think yourself as a software engineer and start doing that individual uh, work at a task level, if you could start thinking about where we can go from here, right? What is the next thing your PM at that time may need as a next step? Can you
Hmm.
think about that and add a provision to make that work easy while doing that specific task will allow you to add that experience in your resume.
Mm-hmm.
uh, just to give you an example, when I was at Mezio software, I mentioned about the Outlook plugin, which we worked on. And while working on Mezio software's core product, which was enterprise file sync and share software,
Mm-hmm.
I started thinking about what are the problems my customers are facing, right? And if you think about the enterprise world, people mainly use Outlook, and they are using file sync and share software to basically store their data.
Right.
Now, if you think about the next step, even from the product perspective, you want to share files and store files and share files, but then that share aspect was pretty much manual, because the way customers were using the software is they were downloading a file, attaching it to their email, and then sending it. Now, as an engineer, how can I think about incorporating that sharing aspect into the software? So
Mm-hmm.
that's where I started thinking about, can I just start creating the URL, which will allow them to automatically add to their emails from our app, which will save their space in the Outlook, which will reduce their number of clicks before they actually share with their customers and make their life easy. And I think that was my first step towards the product management. I think as an engineer, if you can start thinking about what your PM might want to do as a next step, and anticipate that work, and then showcase that in your resume, at least you will start building the credibility as a PM, or at least start setting the foundation as a early stage PM to think about when you will actually enter into the product management, what you want to do in the future. Because
Right.
that is what will allow you to become a good product manager, because you all constantly have to think about what is the next thing you want to build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I mean, that's really great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's definitely really great advice. I think for myself, like the way I started moving from software engineering to product management is I just started taking more tasks. So I remember in my fourth internship as a software engineer, I went to the project manager on the first day, and I told him that, hey, I know I'm hired as a software engineer, but I would love to do product management type of stuff as well. And luckily enough, he told me that, I can take on some product management type of work as well, as long as I get the software engineering stuff done too. And I think it's about, especially if you're trying to transition, it's about taking those opportunities wherever you can get them in order to get that experience, which is really valuable. And yeah.
And I think one thing which I want to add to example which you shared,
Mm-hmm.
at least when I talk to some of the aspiring PMs, they want to become a product manager. However, uh, I think the missing piece of this puzzle is how part, like how they can become a product manager, right? And
Mm-hmm.
understanding that what are the things they can do, which are part of their ongoing day-to-day basis, which will allow them to showcase and build that PM resume is the key. So how can you identify those opportunities on your day-to-day job so that you can build the core skill set as a PM is the most important aspect. And I
Mm-hmm.
think in order to do that, I would definitely recommend uh, to our listeners to go and talk to some of the experienced PMs, right? Share your day to day with them and ask them where I can identify those opportunities which will allow me to build a PM level of resume, right?
Mm-hmm.
And listen some of the things which they what they do on day to day basis, so that you can actually resonate where there is a overlapping and start converting those opportunities into the PM work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And for anybody trying to transition, like that's some really good ways in order to do it. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think let's transition now into the some more tips that we might have for aspiring PMs. So I know, like traditionally, people entering the PM space have always told me that, before a lot of companies, what they used to do is that you do software engineering for a couple of years and then you transition to a management position. But nowadays, there's a lot of different new programs like rotational programs and associate program like product management roles and stuff like that that have recently started, so that people can do product management straight out of graduation. And so I was just wondering, what's your take on how to enter the space? Do you still think that it's that it's worthwhile to do software engineering internships first and then start transitioning into a product management role, or do you think it's better to just go straight into it? And if you want to do product management in the future, do a PM internship first.
I think that's a great question, Devik. And to be honest, I don't think so. There is any white or black answer, right? There is
Right.
no uh, one answer to this question uh, whether you should work as a software engineer and then enter into the PM role, or whether you should directly enter into the PM role. Uh, it depends on individuals' background, preferences, their current situation. There are a lot of other variables comes into picture, and I will not uh, share. Uh, I will not say you should focus on one way versus another, but I
Hmm.
would definitely say whatever is your current opportunity, whether it is in a software engineering role, business analyst role, marketing role, sales role, biz dev role, how you can think about entering into the PM, right? Like it goes back to our earlier answer. Can we identify those opportunities and create that bridge between your current role versus your future role? And how can you do that is the most important aspect.
Hmm.
Now if you think about the benefits of one side versus another, uh, there are pros and cons of each sides, right? Like if you think about
Right.
it as a software engineer and then entering into the PM world, you are little bit more knowledgeable from a technical perspective. You
Hmm.
know how coding works, how engineering mind work, what are the challenges engineers and engineering manager usually face, and from there you basically understand their mindset when you actually deal with them. But
Hmm.
then at the same time, it could have a cons as well. It could have a other consequence where you sometimes start thinking like them as well and start making a decision more in favor of engineering rather than making a decision in favor of customers. Now
Hmm.
versus if you directly enter into the PM world, you may not have that understanding completely because you don't have any hands-on experience how exactly the engineer operates, but then you may be more inclined towards customers, you may be more focused on that. And again, there is positive to the both sides, negative to the both side. I think the key here is, as a product manager, first, can you think about the customer always?
Hmm.
Second, can you make a decision by uh, can you make a decision from a long-term perspective rather than a short-term perspective? And third, which everyone talk about, is empathy, right? Like, and empathy is very uh, this fancy word, but
Right.
can you actually think from other shoes? And it doesn't matter whether you have that experience or you don't have that experience, because sometimes as a PM, there is no way you can have experience from sales, marketing, technical support, trainer, engineers. You cannot have that all that experience, like a hands-on experience. But can you just have that consciousness in your mind to think from others perspective? Because if you think about the entire PM structure, the way I vision it is, the product manager sits in the middle, and then there are just like any other engine, there are connection to every part of the organization. You deal with sales, you deal with marketing, you deal with technical support, you deal with the technical trainer, a technical writer, engineering, of course, uh, and everyone has a different motivation. And in that case, can you think about their motivation, understand their mindset, and make sure you make a decision in the favor of customers? If you
Mhm.
can do that, it doesn't matter which background you come from. At least from a software engineer side, I don't think so software engineering knowledge or background is anymore you have to go in the university or you have to take hands-on experience as a software engineer to understand that. Today all the because of online platform like a learning platforms, you can understand and learn those courses. You can create mobile apps, web apps, excuse me, on your own and gain that experience. So you can definitely do that as your side projects. But I don't see like it just one route versus another. It depends on individuals background and how their current situation is.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean that's a really great analysis. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's showing both sides of where the benefits and the cons lie for each side. So definitely, um, yeah, and like you said, there's no definitive path. But I think what's happened in the last couple of years, at least, is that at least that option has opened up compared to before, where it wasn't. I thought it wasn't as prevalent. Now it's definitely a viable option to go straight into PM. So it's definitely really nice in that way. Um,
Yeah, and totally agree with you on that. I know specifically Amazon does a lot of hiring even for a fresh MBA graduates directly into a PM role. And now the PM role has evolved where you do not have to have like a strong experience. You can directly enter into the product management
mhm,
role coming from a college. And I think just having that opportunity and path and platform for fresh graduates are creating various or additional opportunities for them to hone their skill set as a PM much early in their career. And then they can start thinking about the PM role as just like any other role in the market, right? Like earlier, people do not have an understanding of PM role until they actually start working on something else, and then eventually someone from their team or company will come back and say, hey, you're doing this work, why don't you become a PM? And then they will become a PM accidentally. That is the
right.
trend, or that is the normal path. You will always hear people talking about it in their stories. But now at least having these platforms is making students realize, hey, I can become a product manager directly from a college. And I'm pretty sure, let's say 4 or 5 years down the line, you will start hearing the way people talk about software engineering. People will talk about product management even before they enter into college, saying that, hey, I want to become a product manager.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the goal, that's the hope, because I know when I was first entering university, I didn't know a role like product management existed. So I hope that it becomes a mainstream role, just like software engineering does or is, and more people consider it as a career path.
Yeah, and it's very interesting you mentioned about that one point. You didn't know about that role when you enter into university. To be honest, for me, I didn't know about that role. Like now, so far, I have like 10 plus years of experience. I didn't know about that role until I finished like 5 or 6 years, 5 years in the software engineering role. So it's
Okay.
funny, right? Like the
Yeah.
how people are evolving and the way they are actually moving, probably because of you or because of some of the other folks who are doing these podcasts and writing blogs, posting messages. Kids who are not even in the 11th or 12th grade start knowing about what product management is. And then before even they join a university or undergrad, they will start saying, hey, I want to become a product manager. Already started seeing a lot of entrepreneurs who created a product much earlier in their life, even before they enter into college. And eventually I will not be surprised if those kids will soon take a PM role even before they finish their grad school.
Yeah, no, for sure. I 100% agree with that. It'll be interesting to see what happens. So I think now let's move on a little to the actual, getting internships or roles as a product manager. So Given that you've had experience with hiring and stuff, let's start off with resumes. So, for you, what are some things to highlight on resumes? And like, an example of that could be key skills. How you can format the resumes and how to blend both the technical and non-technical aspects are really important for a PM to have.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting question, and I personally feel even I am still evolving in that area. I am still learning how should I think about what are the skill set I really need. As a PM in general, I always feel you need to know how to execute on complex project, right? That is the fundamental part.
Mhm.
Second, you need to know how to communicate well with your stakeholder, and doesn't matter whether it comes to like a verbal communication, written communication, but just in general sharing your message clearly, it's important. Third, you need to have that awareness, whether it comes to doing something in a tactical way or doing something in a strategic way. Like separating those pieces is really important, and I'm just talking about in general as a product manager, right? Like these are the things which are three key things which I always feel as a PM you need to have. But then when you are trying to enter into PM world, you may not have any real world experience to show your execution ability or
Mhm.
ability to execute. So in that case, I think what I would always like to see, the number of projects you did at school or outside school, right? Like have you done any extra work and think about a simple problem in an innovative way. Just to give you an example, I was talking to this afternoon with another individual who wanted to become a PM, and we were just doing the mock interview. And I asked a question: Can you design a washing machine? And washing machine is just a simple product. Everybody uses it. It's not new. There is no uh, newness to that product, but then can you give that product a newness and think about it not just as a physical product but make it a digital aspect as well, or make it a digital product as well? And what that means is maybe having a mobile app for your washing machine. Like some of the
Right.
challenges which I personally face as a PM or as a general individual, uh, to remember, hey, I want to wash my clothes. Can we have a mechanism to send a notification? Or we are just using our clothes and putting back in the washing machine. Can we just automatically turn on the washing machine at a certain time of the day, and then not worry about remembering that? So can we just think about it in terms of digital aspect and innovate that side? And I think that is the key part. Like, can you think about some of the innovative ways to do the old products? And I wanted to see those aspects in the resume. So from a
Right.
aspiring PM perspective, again, ability to execute on a complex projects, ability to do the discovery. We talked about it over our LinkedIn post last couple of weeks back. Can you do a discovery and think about every single corner case or use case as a part of your product development? Whether
Mhm.
you are launching that product in North America or launching that product in Asia, launching that product in Europe, every country is different. Can you think about some of the legal compliance perspective of that country? Can you think about the accessibility perspective of that? Maybe not to that specific country, but can you just think about your user base, right? Like you may not
Mhm.
have people who you may have a people with a general disability or some kind of restriction to use that product. Can you think about those aspects as well? So can you
Mhm.
define your user base properly and then make sure you consider all the use cases that individual will face, and outline those as a part of your discovery work. And I think that is something which is critical. And then the one thing which I talked about, right, like the tactical versus the strategic aspect. So what exactly is the difference between these two? So tactical is there is a lot of ongoing operational work you do. So for example, uh, responding to stakeholders email, thinking about and evaluating your business as a part of weekly business, monthly business reviews, versus you also want to think about where your product will eventually go. So can you create that platform and roadmap for a long term perspective, and make sure you prioritize those features, challenges, problems in such a way that your customers will get maximum benefit. And
Mm-hmm.
if we could see that aspect in the resume, I think it makes interviewer or resume reviewer much more confident. Okay, I want to bring this person for an interview, and then make sure move this individual forward to actually provide him or her an offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's definitely great. I know I'm going to take some of those hints from that to structure my resume. So I really do appreciate talking about those and some of the mindset of what a hiring manager is looking for in a PM, aspiring PM. I think sort of adding to that, one of the most the toughest parts about a PM resume, especially compared to like software engineering resumes, is that it's not as definitive. Where in a software engineering resume, you can talk about your data structures and algorithms and talk about go full on about your technicals, while in a PM internship you have to talk about both your technical and non-technical aspects. And I know like one of the biggest questions I always get is how do you format your resume, or how can you structure your resume so it facilitates both of those. So I was just wondering what your opinion on that was, and if you had any hints for that.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great question. And I do agree with you a little bit. As a PM, it is better. And again, it is just from a personal experience and background. I
Yeah.
personally feel it is better to have a little bit technical knowledge. It doesn't need to have hands on technical background. However, it is better to highlight some of the technical skills, such as I can do a coding in Python, I can write a shell script, I can automate certain queries, I can write SQL queries. I think those skills allows you to understand some of the challenges your engineering team will face as well. And I think it
Mm-hmm.
will also provide you an ability to make a better decision, because sometimes you will feel, hey, I want to add just this one field into this form. And there is a funny video on YouTube available for that. Like a guy is asking, as a PM, he's asking like, hey, I want to add a this date of birth, and then the engineers is responding, date of birth depends on this particular service, from there it will store into this database, and then it will impact the scalability and so on. But it's a very interesting video, I can share that
Okay.
with you.
Yeah.
But it's basically, as a PM, it will also allow you to understand those challenges engineering team will face. So it's better to have that. But when it comes to product management, I think where, and again, this is my personal thought,
Mm-hmm.
where everyone who is trying to enter into this field is struggling to understand that definite skill set. And you actually touch on the very good point. When it comes to engineering, there is a clear difference and clear understanding. Okay, you should know C++, you should know Python, you should know React, or you
Mm-hmm.
should know Angular, and so on. Versus as a PM, there is no clear there is no clear skill set which we talked about, right? And in
Right.
that case, it is all boils down to non tangible skills: ability to communicate, ability to write well, ability to have a mental toughness, because now you will be getting a pushback from various other stakeholders. Then ability to have this long term vision, ability to be more strategic. And if you think about all the skills, PM needs to have are non tangible skills. And
Right.
that's where there is no clear boundary or clear pool of skills you can develop. However, like if you think about it, these are the skills which we actually start building pretty much early in our schooling days, right? Like you try to learn how to write, how to think strategically, or even sometimes in a long term perspective without realizing, because you will always get this question, hey, what do you want to become when you will grow up? And you'll start making all the stories like, I want to become doctor, I want to become singer, I want to become actor, and so on. So you actually start building those skills pretty much early in your uh, age group. So can you go back and think about all the skills which you actually started building when you were in school, and at least start connecting with the work which you want to do in the future, or start adding that information into your resume will allow you to build that skill set. Like some
Right.
of the times you even go for a shopping and you try to bargain, right? It's exactly the skill PM needs, because you constantly negotiate either on the requirements or on the timeline or on the number of features or something else with every stakeholders in your group. So
Right.
can you actually highlight your ability to negotiate in your resume? And I think by understanding those non tangible skills and making that pool of those skills will make you understand, okay, where you want to go and what you want to do as a PM. Now, how you want to do that, and I that is something unknown unless you have a strong mentoring or strong support from your home or from your friends or from your community. And that is where I guess you can actually tap onto some of the experienced PMs in the industry and ask them, hey, what exactly you do so that I can take my first skill and then what and start connecting with it. I think that will
Right.
allow you to create that resume, what you will eventually need to become a successful PM.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I had. That especially when I didn't have much PM experience, how do I relate my previous experience to PM? So one of the ways I got over that is I talked to a bunch of product managers in industry, and got their insights about what they're looking for. Because I think we do so many things on a day to day basis, or in our previous work that we don't realize connects to PM, but really does already. So if you just dig back, you can actually probably find some very relevant experience to highlight if you are looking for PM internships or
I think
roles.
I think one thing which I would definitely like to highlight there, which I personally did and it
Mhm.
tried and tested, it worked with a few other folks as well. Uh, Without thinking, hey, I want to become a PM, I actually just wrote it down, my entire experience, like in a terms of bullet points. All the
Okay.
things I have done, whether as a software engineer, whether as a program manager, and including some of the certifications, some of the books I read, like everything. And I have this 5 pager document, and where I have actually wrote everything all the way. When I entered into the industry first time, all the way
Wow.
up to before I became a product manager, on piece of paper. And I think that allowed me to just start thinking about how I can connect all these pieces with experienced PMs, what they are doing, right? Whenever they talk about certain things, how they are doing. And even right now, I'm doing a similar exercise for myself to become, let's say, I want to become eventually a director or VP, or I wanted to create that vision, right? Like, what are the things they actually do and how they talk, and how can I use my current experience and write it down and start thinking about connecting with their experience? And I think that is helping me to just understand, okay, I am not behind. I understand this. I am doing these things, and this is the path I can create for myself to enter into that role. And I
Mhm.
think that will really help you, because sometimes everything is in your head. Just putting that on piece of paper will really help you to understand, hey, you actually have experience as a PM. You may not have
Right.
a title, That's a different story. But it's not like you have not done this. It just now you take those pieces from your background and start connecting with the actual role so that you can get a title.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree with that sentiment, and that's a really good idea. I'm going to start doing that in my experience too, just so I have that really point that I can keep adding to, and
and
look back on.
and if you want to just share that with me, happy to take a look at it and say, okay, this is something definitely matches, this is not matches, this is matches, and so on. Because then at least you can build on to that experience and then start thinking about, let's say you have actually dived deep into one specific area and did some research work, you did a comparative analysis. Hey, this is perfect, right? This is what PM usually does. Let's take this and start thinking about like making it bigger and connecting with the proper PM work, and just build on to that story, because then it will allow you to build couple of bullet points in your resume, and eventually it will all boils down to how you can create and show those bullet points and make sure you have that diverse background and versatile skill set. At least this is what will make you unique among all the candidates in that pool.
Hmm. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's definitely great advice. And I think let's move on to the next step. So you get your resume down, you get selected by a by a recruiter for an interview, and I think this is one of the other big questions I keep getting about PM interviews, because once again, unlike software engineering, it's not as definitive. Where it's like most of the time in a software engineering role, it would be, or a lot of times it's a coding challenge where you have to solve a certain problem with the data structure algorithm, and stuff like that. But PM is a little more all over the place depending on the company and some other stuff. But I guess let's talk about some of the types of questions that may be asked on the interview, and what are some of your tips for people to prepare for a PM interview?
No, I think that's a great question. And actually, I don't know whether you realize that while answering or asking that question, you actually touch on a very key point is every company is different, and each company's evaluation criteria for PM role is different.
Mm-hmm.
So now I would definitely, and there are overlapping skill set and questions as well. So definitely there is some foundational work you can do before you actually go and start interviewing with the companies. But yes, if you are focusing on certain companies, you may have to build a specific uh, skill set and go back and think about certain questions which they focus on. Just to give you an example, I know when it comes to Google interview, they ask a lot about estimation related questions. So, for example, can you estimate number of bicycles we have today in San Francisco?
Mm-hmm.
So just come up with that number, and they want to see your thought process, how you will come up with that number. So that's a one type of question. There is another type of question is called product design question, which is more about, we talked about earlier, like design a washing machine, and it could be a
Mm-hmm.
physical product, it could be a digital product. Let's say design Yelp like app, or design Gmail like app which will have a reminder or a calendar capabilities. So something along that line, that is like a product design question. There is other type of question which mainly focus on go to market, basically understanding your market, right? Like if you want to enter into US market versus EU market is totally different, versus if you want to enter into India market, you just need to understand what are the main pain points that market has, and then
Right.
come up with the requirement based on that. So how you
Mm-hmm.
can answer that question, so that's something, another type of question you may want to think about. There is other type of questions which is like a at least I know Amazon focuses on the on that a lot, based on Amazon's leadership principle, is a behavioral type of question. So something along
Mm-hmm.
the line, tell me a time when you worked on complex project, something along that line. So you basically explain how you want to start with that. How you started working on that project, how complex that project was. And I know Amazon focuses a lot on STAR framework, which stands for situation, task, action, results.
Hmm.
And you basically formulate a question around these 4 points. But these are the pretty common type of question you usually get in the PM interviews. I personally focus a lot on a product design questions when I am preparing for any interviews, because I think as a PM, it's important to think about all those requirements. So I personally felt when I was preparing, like last year, it's not only help you to crack that specific interview, or crack your interviews, but also uh, build that muscle in your head to understand all the requirement to become a good PM. So when you will
Hmm.
actually start doing the PM role, you can start using the same mechanism what you build while you prepare for that interview. So I think that I personally feel that is the most important aspect for any PM, and I
Hmm.
definitely recommend to focus on that. Because uh, estimation questions, I know Google focuses a lot on that, but I haven't seen all the other companies focuses on, like even some of the startups will focus a lot on the design questions and
Right.
behavioral questions, but they may not go that deep into estimation questions.
Hmm. So, so when it comes to answering those questions, do you have any resources or other areas you can, prepare for, help prepare for the interview?
Yeah, I think the best book so far I found is the Cracking the PM Interview, and
Right.
the other one is the Product Manager Interview by Lewis Lynn. And I think I found out, like, it's not about just showing a questions, but also understanding how an expert will answer that question. And I think this book from Lewis Lynn is basically highlight that, because it has all these various types of questions which I talked about, and also it has ideal answers as well. So as a
Hmm.
PM, you start building that muscle memory in your head, like, okay, this is the structure, this is the format, this is how I should approach it, and then you basically go and practice it.
Hmm.
Other than that, so basically when I prepared for interviews, what I did was I used this book and then understand everything, like just went through this book and um, try to understand how he answered those questions. And then there is this resource called productmanagementexercise.com, which has like a lot of questions. And if you subscribe to them, I think they also send you one question per day. I think I subscribe to them on Twitter, and then they
Hmm.
will basically send you one new question every day, which will allow you to just practice and do a mock interview with someone. But I think these are the most important resources, at least I used. But I would like to highlight one thing. Other than that, there is like a really, 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 and I'm just stressing on that, important resource, and I use this my friend, and it's just like any friend from the PM community who
Yeah.
can practice with you and help you to do these mock interviews. Because in the end, it's all about making sure you are comfortable and you are building that framework in your head when you actually go in front of interviewer and just formulate that answer in much more structured and crisp and concise way, and share the exact details. Because if you think about from a product design questions, there is no right or wrong answer, right? Like you can come up with any answer how to design a washing machine, and I will be like, yes, that's great, perfect, sure.
Yeah.
However, it may not have that many benefits to customers, right? Let's say
Right.
my answer may have three benefits versus your answer may have six benefits. In that case, I am not wrong, but interviewer will prefer you to qualify for the next round, because you basically stretch the benefits for the customer, you focus on the
Right.
customer value. And then making sure how can you get that crisp answer is important, and that's why it is really critical to practice, practice, practice. And I think that is where it helped me, like, to be honest. And I know it may sound really weird for folks, like even for the Amazon where they focus only on the behavioral questions. I actually did a mock interview for almost 6 months. Like, it was different, I was
Uh,
not doing it daily, but at least 3 days in a week I was interviewing with my friend, doing back and forth. I like will block 1 hour, I will ask him one question, and we'll do it for 30 minutes. He will do the same thing with me, and that's how we basically helped each other to crack some of the interviews last year. So I think
mhm,
it was really important to practice. Uh, it reminds me there is another YouTube channel, and I don't remember the name of this person who started it, but he was a PM at Google. It's called
mhm,
Exponent. And the channel name is Exponent. And I know he basically interviews product managers who cleared, and manager interview of FANG companies. Recently, they got an offer, and it basically also shows like how you should approach a question, and what's your structure should look like. So I found it's very useful. I definitely recommend listener to go and check it out.
mhm. And I'll leave. I'll try leaving links for all of that down, like, in the bio of this or in my post or whatever, so you can get those resources. But thank you so much for sharing those. That's definitely very helpful. And yeah, I think I'll definitely be taking a look at it. So I hope, and I hope other people will be looking at them as well. So I think, relating back to the interview, I think the last question I'm going to ask is, you know, one of the most common questions is like a situational problem where it's like, how would you approach releasing a new feature or product, and then just go. So I was just wondering, how would you start to break down a situational problem, and what, as a hiring manager, what are you looking for from a candidate when they're answering that question?
Great question again. I know if you would have asked me this question, let's say 3 years back or 2 years back, I would have directly jump onto it and start answering uh, process number one, process number two, process number three. Like, I would have gone to customer, ask their pain points, ask what are the challenges they are facing, captured that, and then go to engineering team, talk to them about the most important point, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But today, I think my approach is a little bit different. Uh, what I realized is interviewer is not exactly looking for how accurate you are, but he's also looking for, like, he's definitely looking for whether you are providing the right steps or not. But on top of that, he's also looking for how authenticate you are. And that particular aspect usually come when you share a real world example.
Hmm.
So in that case, like, now if you would ask me, I would have answered this question in a little bit different way and say, hey, let me share an example when I have actually uh, completed a discovery, starting from scratch, build a product from scratch, all the way up to thinking about the go to market strategy and increasing an adoption, and successfully did that to increase the company revenue by x millions.
Hmm.
And I'm just making a number. Now, if
Right.
you think about it, this just one line. I summarize quickly everything in one line and also provided you a quick benefit, what benefit I created for my company. Or
Hmm.
eventually you could talk about what benefit you could have created for your customers as well. Um, but by just saying that, it just shows, okay, he knows what he's talking about. He provided me the initial actions, what exactly he did, and then also talk about what is the benefits he produced in just one line. Now, talk about the real example, right? And again, it goes back to my earlier topic, which we talked about, the star framework, right? I usually focus a lot on a star framework. Every answer I provide, let's talk about the situation, let's talk about task, let's talk about action, and then the results. So I would have actually break my answer into these four parts, and then provide a much more detailed example to interviewer, and then end with the summary, once again summarizing my entire answer. This is how I would have approached to launch a specific product. And I think
Hmm.
that shows much more uh, authenticity, and you basically earn that trust as well. Yeah, this person is not just talking about in terms of theory, but he has actually gone through those steps uh, and executed end-to-end product. And that's where I would recommend all the students or someone who is trying to enter, take a particular project, right? Like, try to do uh, a specific project from a product management process standpoint, end to end, all the way from discovery to you launch that. And that
Hmm.
will create that framework in your head to answer these questions.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know I'll start looking at the STAR framework. That sounds like a really good resource to break down these questions. So I definitely that's really nice for sharing. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, so I think moving on to the next question. So with the COVID-19 situation right now, a lot of people got their internships rescinded or positions rescinded, and currently it's a very tough time to find another position because of hiring freezes and situation in general. So I was just wondering what your advice was that if what could students do to better themselves if they cannot secure an internship this summer, or aspiring PMs can do if they do not secure a full time position right now.
Yeah, I think totally agree with you. I think this is definitely unprecedented time. Nobody has ever seen this situation before. Uh, and to be honest, people are definitely struggling, facing challenges. There are folks, I know there are students who missed on their internship. Their internships are cancelled because of the
Mm-hmm.
COVID 19. There are folks who lost a job. And when I think about this situation, like, at least right now, I'm blessed, and touch wood, will not face that situation. But I also think about my personal level. If I think about, let's say, if I face this situation, what I would have done. And every time when I question this in my mind, the only answer I get it is, uh, first, this is temporary, not going to last forever, right? And
Right.
even if it lasts, let's say, the way everybody is talking about, 12 to 18 months, it is still temporary. 18
Mm-hmm.
months, if you think about from your career perspective, which is usually 35 to 40 years, or 30 years if you are just starting a journey, or even in my case, let's say next 30 years, uh, it's still much more smaller number, right? Like, it's not
Right. Okay.
going to span out like an entire lifetime. And in that case, uh, just like a product manager skill set, can I think about the future, can I focus on that long term vision, and start doing some smaller things in the time I have. Right now you may have a lot of free time. Can you start reading some of the interesting books related to product management? And I would say, at least top three recommendations I have is, uh, one which I talked about, inspired by Marty Kagan. The second is the Lean Product Playbook by Dan Olson. And third, Hard Things About the Hard Things, I think by Ben Horowitz, if I'm not forgetting the author name. But at least these are the top three books at least I have. Can you start reading that? Can you build your product management library of a number of books which you feel more connected with? Can you start creating resources to become much more knowledgeable in the product management world? For example, write blogs, write
Mhm.
comments on various products which are available in the market, create a product analysis document. I think one thing which usually analyst does, they write a summary of a product and think about how this product may do. And you could be totally wrong, you don't have to publish that if you feel you don't want to publish it. But can you start creating those resources and use this time in your favor, just to build that product management muscle? And then once the opportunity will knock on your door, you will be already ready to grab that opportunity. So only advice which I would have followed, or which I will follow in the future, is just learn. Focus on
Mhm.
learning. That's the most important aspect. Everything is temporary. Can I just do certain things right now so that it will help me in the future? And just going and creating that plan, which is a working backward plan, will allow you to be much more confident and focus on the right things rather than thinking about, I don't know whether I'm going in the right direction or not.
And I think, just like you said, it's unprecedented time, and everything is temporary. So this time will pass. So, you know, don't. I think, one of the biggest things about this pandemic, just beyond, uh, you know, the deaths and the infection and the actual disease itself, is how much it breaks people's spirits. And so, I think, I think I think that's something we have to focus on and try to raise other people's spirits and our own, and staying positive about this whole situation. And so, that's
Yeah,
it.
and I think you could utilize this time to even connect with the folks who are there in the industry. People are more open to talk to you right now than
Yeah.
any other day or any other time, right? You have a more opportunity to connect with other folks. I know one of my friends also started this initiative called Help Your Peers, and this specifically focus on the program and product management and the UX designers. So want to take a look at it, want to join that, uh, to connect with some of the experienced folks in the industry, feel free to do that, because definitely it will allow you to connect with these folks and more focus on the learning rather than anything else.
Hmm. For sure. 100% agree with you there. And I'll try to leave a link for that as well, below. Cool. I think, I have one last question that my friend was asking me. So he just recently got a full time job, and he was just wondering if you had any tips about how to. So he's working remote, like we are, like almost everybody is, and he was just wondering if you had any tips of how to onboard remotely, because one of the biggest things when you come into a new job, and to like not during these times, but in a normal way, is you go to the office, have an introduction, and sort of figure out your place. But remotely, that sort of changes the game. So I was just wondering, do you have any tips for him, for how he can onboard remotely and maximize that his opportunities?
Do you mind sharing which role he joined?
Yeah, sure.
Did
He's
he join
a
as a PM or any other role?
So he's actually joined as a software engineering intern.
Okay, okay. And to be honest, I was just curious because I wanted to know. Then, based on that, I can share more details. But to be honest, one thing, and it doesn't matter whether you join as a PM or a software engineer, but I would recommend we focus a lot on uh, like a documentation or resources or a material which is available. And in this process, we fail to focus on folks or people, team members who usually are around us. And I do understand everybody is busy in their own work. However, if you just approach them and ask them for help, they will not say no. And I
Mm-hmm.
would recommend him to schedule as many one-on-ones as he can with team members. I would definitely say he should do one-on-ones with every single person in his team, and
Mm-hmm.
including the tech lead, architect, uh, product manager, his manager, his other peers, and probably if there is even adjacent team, depends on his company size and depends on his team size. If he could also do that with some of the other folks in the parallel teams, I think that will add a much more value, because he will learn a lot from them. He will learn a lot of ongoing challenges they face, lot of tips and tricks and techniques these guys have built over the period of their journey as a part of that team or as a part of that company. I think those will be much more valuable. We usually tend to
Mm-hmm.
forget there is a human aspect, human touch involved in our life. We thought, or we usually think, I can only tap onto the resources or things what I have, but can we reach out to these folks and ask them for help, or just ask them a general question, their experiences, some of the techniques they have built in last few years while working in that team? I think it will help him to quickly adapt and learn those things and eliminate the same mistakes these guys have made in last couple of years or whatever time they were part of that team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's great advice. Thank you so much for sharing, and I'll definitely let him know about what tips you shared. And I think just even for me right now, I've onboarded onto my new role this week. So definitely, even in my own internship, I'll definitely take the opportunity to connect with the team
Yeah,
and book
make
a
sure
one-on-ones.
you schedule one-on-ones with every single person in the team, and depends on their schedule. But I think, especially as a PM, it is much more valuable, because that's where you have an opportunity to connect with your team members and even build trust among them, because now you are entering into the entering into completely new world where you want to make sure they trust you, because eventually you will be making a lot of decisions, and if your team members are not trusting you, your life will be much more difficult as a PM. I think uh, that's where it is important to connect it at a human level before you actually start making decision at a product level.
Hmm. For sure. Perfect. Thank you so much, Shreyas, for coming on. This was really helpful, and I hope that I know it's beneficial for myself, and I hope it was beneficial for some of the listeners. And yeah, thank you so much. You have any last things to say?
No, I would only say thanks, Davik. This has been great conversation. I enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for doing this, and definitely I would say for everyone, including both of us, we should just continue to focus on learnings and take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. And as usual, guys, if you ever want to reach out, I'm always available for if you want any help or anything like that. You can book a time with me, and I'll be posting some more tips and stuff on LinkedIn for some of the stuff I have on the job search. And I hope to perhaps have some further conversations with Shreyas in the future on some more stuff we can help with. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and take care. Stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks.